Our conference is our primary revenue source, and also, as everyone's in the nonprofit world, is it's where they're face-to-face. When we look for a conference, we specifically set up multiple tastings. And the first tasting that we do, we bring our conference planning leadership in addition to a chef. So we'll bring one of our chefs, and there's chefs all over our association and within our leadership. They're members, they're not on staff. So we have a culinary competition committee. At that tasting, we expect the hotel's executive chef and his culinary team to present the menu to us and to make us different dishes from their menu, or just dishes that they've created themselves that, they feel proud of. And we taste it, and we actually score and write feedback. And then we provide that to the culinary team live at the hotel, and then also follow-up notes. And if we don't feel like the hotel is excited for a food conference that's very food focused, or we feel like the culinary experience we had isn't what we're looking for, we won't go there.
This is Associations Thrive, the podcast celebrating successful associations and their leaders. I'm your host, Joanna Pineda, CEO and Chief Troublemaker at Matrix Group International. Listen in as top association executives tell all, revealing the creative and innovative ways they're increasing membership, generating revenue, nurturing engagement, and reimagining their organizations. By the way, if you've launched a new initiative, created new member services, or updated your governance structure and are seeing great results, I want to hear your story, and so do my listeners. I'd love to have you as a guest. Go to podcast.matrixgroup.net and apply to be on Associations Thrive. Now let's dive into this week's show. Today, I'm speaking with Leah Reily, Executive Director of the Association for Healthcare Foodservice, or AHF. Leah, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Leah, tell us about AHF.
The Association for Healthcare Foodservice, we are a 501c6 nonprofit organization. We're 15 years old in our current format. We're actually the merger of two nonprofits that came together in 2009, and they have a longer history. One of our chapters is celebrating their 50th anniversary this November, so we've been around for a while in one format or another. We serve food service professionals in healthcare and senior living, senior dining. So our members are food service directors, executive chefs, dietitians, managers within the teams that provide and create food in hospitals and senior living facilities. And specifically, we're a little bit niche. We work in self-operated food service, so meaning that the hospitals and the senior living communities hire and run their department themselves rather than having a contract management company come in and do that work for them. So a little bit like an AMC versus an independently run nonprofit.
Let me make sure I understand this. So your members run self-operated food service within these facilities, as opposed to having a company like an Aramark come in and provide the food and actually provide the service.
Yeah, in those situations, and there's a time and place for everything, a hospital or a senior living facility would hire a contract management company to run it. They would actually provide the staff and run everything and produce the food and do all the purchasing and then bill that back to the facility or the community. But they would do the work. And for us, we feel like the best outcomes for patients, staff, and families is a self-operated facility where you are employing the teams and the leaders to do that work and to provide the food program for the hospital and the senior living communities.
So Leah, if I'm the CFO of a senior living community like Green Spring, for example, in Springfield, Virginia, and I'm always looking at cost, and one of these outsourced contract management companies comes in and says, we can help you manage costs and improve quality, and you never have to worry about staffing again. What do your members say to that?
It's always a complicated issue for sure. We feel that if you are running it yourself, you can, generally speaking, through, I won't get into the mechanics of all of it, but through broadline distributors, and GPOs and other programs, as well as efficient and well-run management, you can get the same discounts that those organizations are telling you they can get, that, you can get the same cost savings. Your staff are typically happier in their jobs. They're doing their thing. But for us, the employees are the focus. The food is the focus. The patient and the staff outcomes are the focus. And yes, there's that financial element, but you can provide those same cost savings and those same financial savings within a self-operated system. You're not necessarily saving money. You're often probably paying a little bit extra because you're paying someone to do it for you. So you're paying that premium and you're paying a percentage on top because they obviously have to make money and they need to be able to function. So you are paying extra more often than not. So for us, we feel like it provides better food programs, better outcomes at the end of the day.
And Leah, I bet because they're self-operated, they're integrated into the facility planning. And hopefully it means they're closer to the patients and the staff.
Yeah. I think that you have more focus on the employees and their programs. They are a part of the hospital and of the senior living facility, and they're not necessarily serving two masters. Their only focus is their location and their organization that they're serving, and the patients and the family and the colleagues that they're providing food programs for within those locations. It is more direct. You have more of a buy-in. That's definitely something that we talk a lot about when we're talking to our members, is having that buy-in, having the focus on the staff, having the focus on the food and the creativity and the innovation.
Well, what I'm taking away from this interview is that the next time I have myself or a family member in some kind of a healthcare facility, I'm going to ask the question, is this self-operated?
Yeah. You should. Focus is definitely on food. It's important to us. And I think when we're all in a hospital or a senior living facility, it seems like it's on the side, but it's probably the core thing, right? When you walk away from something like that, you remember the food and you remember how it made you feel.
Absolutely. And you either complain about the food or you say the food was terrific.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a key part of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Leah, you're doing some amazing things at AHF. Before we get into all of that, let's talk about your journey. So how do you get to become executive director of an organization like AHF?
I actually am trained as an environmental conservationist. So I have, I think, like a lot of nonprofit executives, taken a bit of a wonky path. I started working in environmental nonprofits and I learned a lot of lessons. I worked for some where there was no executive director and there was turnover and they were trying to figure out what they were doing and how they wanted to function and what was best practice. And I learned from those experiences that I really just liked running nonprofits and organizing nonprofits and running a business.
Well, how'd you even find nonprofits and associations?
I'm a World Bank child. My dad worked for the World Bank doing secondary education in developing nations. So I have kind of a history, and my mom's a park ranger. She's a conservationist as well. And I have that history of understanding nonprofits and their role in society. So I knew when I left graduate school that I wanted to work in nonprofits and that I grew up in DC and that was the place to do it. So I specifically went out looking to work for nonprofits and wanted to be the executive director of a nonprofit. So yay.
Wow.
I made it.
Yeah. So how'd you get to AHF? Because you were working for an association management company. Tell us the story. AHF was being run by an AMC, but they decided to separate.
Yeah. I worked for another client at an AMC, running another client, and they're a great organization. I loved working with them, but I wanted to make a shift and a change. And AHF had made a change from their previous executive director who wasn't necessarily the best fit for their culture and what they were looking to do. And I put in a bid to become the executive director. The owner of the AMC, I consider to be one of my mentors, and he said, I'll put you forward and that's it, right? And I didn't want to ever have a position that I didn't work to achieve on my own. And I was younger, I think, to my understanding, obviously didn't see the list or anything or know who the other people were necessarily, but my understanding is that I was the youngest of any of the candidates that was put forward and maybe the least experienced to a degree. I had my CAE. I think I had all the knowledge and experience to do it. And that experience, especially in a nonprofit, of being a doer and not necessarily from a large to small nonprofit experience, but small nonprofit staff to executive director, which I always think is a great pathway. And they did select me. I think they were looking for, in my opinion, the right thing, which was a cultural fit. And I think I fit for the culture that they wanted in their leadership and in their executive director, that they wanted to build and rebuild for their association a very specific culture for the board, the committees, and the staff. And, we worked really hard on that for the last 6 years to get to a very happy place that we're at now. But I think that was part of the decision to bring me on, was that cultural fit. I may not have had as much experience as the other candidates, but it felt right for them. I've always been thankful for that. It was a challenge and it felt very scary. I had a lot of that, am I right? And it's a big jump. But I think if you're not a little scared, maybe it's not the right challenge for you. I love AHF. I love the people and the staff and the committees. And there's just a lot of passion and a lot of knowledge within the association that I can learn from.
Leah, do you have advice for someone who maybe is thinking about making the jump to an ED or a CEO role, or maybe is younger and thinking, wow, I'm competing against older, more experienced, not necessarily more qualified candidates? So how do you get there? How do you get over the hurdle?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I did speak at ASAE this year for the first time, which was fun. And we did a session on the lonely small staff CEO. And we talked about the different pathways to getting into that role. And one of those was small staff employee to small staff leader. And it is scary. But I think often those people do the best in the small staff associations because they go into it knowing that they're going to have to do, I think, more.
You're going to be more tactical.
More tactical. Yeah, more of a hands-on management CEO and less of a strategy. Is there someone behind me to catch that idea that I had? If you're throwing an idea out, more than likely you're putting it into place yourself because you have a total of 4 staff of which you're one. Or if, you have 2 or you're the only one, it's just different. And I think the small staff employee understands that because they were the person doing the work. So I just think you have to go for it. I think you have to have confidence.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be willing to ask for help and support. I luckily had 4 mentors from the AMC that I could lean on very heavily that were longtime experienced CEOs of nonprofits. And they helped me out a lot. But my board too, and my industry board, which are all the vendors in the food service world that are providing products, they're all running very high-level businesses. And I've never taken it as a tact that I can't talk to them and ask them and say, I don't know how to do that. How should I do that? And a lot of them are mentors to me. And that's been a learning experience. So it's been great.
Boy, that's really good advice, to really think of your board as your support system as well.
Yeah. I mean, they have outcomes that they want you to achieve, but I think we're all here for the same goal, which is to provide services for the members. And if they know something I don't have any problem saying, how do you recommend that I do that? And I'll ask them staffing stuff too, because often they're the ones that you can talk to about that from a privacy standpoint as well. But they're running big teams and they've done a lot of HR things that I haven't because they're running teams of 3 or 4, or 100 or however many people it is. So when you run a team of 4, you're not going to come across as many management issues as they are.
Right. Well, let's turn to AHF. During the prep, you talked about how you rebranded. And you started the rebrand in 2023 and then launched it this past February. So talk to us about why AHF needed to rebrand and why you decided to do it.
When the associations merged in 2009, my understanding is they did a very good but somewhat rapid in terms of rebranding process to create their logo, their name, to figure out who they were. And we just felt coming out of COVID, coming into what is a completely new world that got blown up and everybody had to start again. And that seems to be every year now. It's just continually fluctuating, that it was time to make sure that our association was modern in its approach, in its identity, and that we were meeting the members where they wanted us to, because everything is different for them. It's everything is upside down in comparison to what it was before COVID. So we felt like it was time. We were a little bit in that slow decline position that was very slow, kind of iceberg slow, but that can start to rapidly increase. And I was watching that and thinking, we need to do something now when it's easier to address, to turn things around and go back in the other direction of an increase, either slowly, ideally exponentially. So we decided to hire a company to help us because we only have 4 people. And we had that conversation, there was that, like, couldn't we just do it ourselves? I mean, yes, but I might be dead at the end of that. So probably not.
So what did the rebrand look like? What was the process and what did you change?
We did a discovery process. We talked about, should we change our name? Because we wanted to make sure we were addressing the newer segment of our membership that we're working to bring in, which is senior living. And our name only says healthcare, which senior living communities typically don't consider themselves healthcare. They consider themselves hospitality. And it's all hospitality, but it's always a word thing in every association. I think you have those words that have meaning to a specific segment. We did not change our name because we decided to keep the name recognition that we had, but we did upgrade our logo. We say that we've refreshed it because we kept a lot of elements. We've always had a fork and a knife in our name. We still have a fork and a knife in our name. We're a bit literal on that front, but we're food service. So we wanted to convey that. We created a tagline. We refreshed our entire brand, the colors, the fonts. We had a lot of conversations in terms of accessibility of, all caps or mixed case and all of those different things. We just went through the whole process that wasn't necessarily done when the association was formed to understand our identity, what it looked like and what it meant to us and what our actual feeling of who we are was. And then we launched all of that and redesigned all the sub-logos and everything in February. We also decided to do everything at once. We brought on a new association management software that we feel like better meets our desired growth structures for membership and helps the staff with some of the things that they do.
Wow, you are going to be dead by the end of all this.
We're all resting. We're all lying down now. Our conference is over.
So you do a rebrand, you put in a new AMS, and I'll tell you, I often will work with organizations that say, we need to fix the slow decline in our meeting registrations, so we're going to redo our logo. And I say, updating the logo is not going to fix that problem. But it sounds like you were thinking about this much more strategically and much more comprehensively. So what's been the result of this rebrand?
Yeah, it's been really surprising. We went into it thinking, and we redesigned our conference brand as well with something that was evergreen. But we went into it thinking, hey, and saying it's going to take time to see the results of this. And we have to be okay with taking the risk, which we haven't necessarily done before. We've been a little bit more conservative, especially post-COVID. So to spend X number of dollars, close to $100,000 of our reserves towards this program, all encompassing, was scary for us because it's not something that we're used to doing. And that's a cultural shift to make that change to more of a risky move to grow, but you need that. And we thought it would take a while, but it's actually been really successful. Our national conference from February to when we hosted it at the end of August, it was our largest national conference in 6 years. We had a 38% growth.
Wow.
From last year, we had 38% growth in attendance of our operator members. Our membership has operators and vendors. And the operators are obviously the vendors want more operators. So that tends to be the focus of our data points. But we had a 38% growth in attendance from the operators. Half of our attendees were new. So we had more new people at our conference than we've ever had in the history of the association. We hit our strategic membership goals for the first time in a few years. It really turned around very quickly, which was very exciting for us. We didn't think that it would be that quick, but it was an instant result. Obviously, there's work to be done now, but it was very successful and we have felt really good. It's nice to see the instant results because I think it puts that pep in your step of we made the right choice and it was what we needed to kind of refresh the association. I will say it also refreshed the staff because you kind of feel weighed down by things sometimes. And when we redid everything, it felt like we had a weight lifted of we're working with something that we created. And we're working with something that we were a part of. And I think that is really important. So that's been nice to see from a staffing perspective as well.
Leah, it sounds like the rebrand created a burst of creativity and maybe innovation from the staff and some new energy that then got translated into the different things that you do, which is why you're seeing this success.
Yeah.
Because a refresh logo on its own usually doesn't do it. It sounds like there was more to this.
Yeah, I think it ended up being, that may not have been how we went into it, but it ended up being kind of a full holistic organizational refresh. And the staff, we also had a lot of conversations. We did half a day every day for a whole week. We looked at our entire organizational calendar just as staff and said, when do we do things? How do we do them? How do we want to change that? What's going to make sense? And what ideas do people have? And that did a lot too. We have a scholarship program that helps people attend our conference. And my membership manager recommended a new way of rolling that out. And that was a big part in increased attendance to the conference.
Wow.
So it's things like that where I think, we said to the staff, what do you think we should do to be efficient and to reach our goals? And they did a really good job of saying, this is what would help me in my role. And this is what I think would feed back into the association. We had those discussions too. So I think that was really helpful.
I love this. What you did is the rebrand sparked off a wave of conversations about how to do things better.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your conference. So you're in food service, and you've got a really specific way of picking venues for your conference that I think my listeners have to hear about.
Yeah, my poor meeting planners. I always tell people I don't eat for a living, but I feel like I eat for a living because when I go places, we're eating and we take it very seriously. We're all about food. So our conference is our primary revenue source. And also, as everyone's in the nonprofit world, it's where they're face to face. When we look for a conference, we specifically set up multiple tastings. And the first tasting that we do, we bring our conference planning leadership in addition to a chef. So we'll bring one of our chefs, and there's chefs all over our association and within our leadership.
Oh, so these are members that you're bringing who are chefs?
They're members. They're not on staff. So we have a culinary competition committee, and the lead of that committee is a chef. That person always comes with us to our tasting. At that tasting, we expect the hotel's executive chef and his culinary team to present the menu to us and to make us different dishes from their menu, or just dishes that they've created themselves that, they feel proud of. And we taste it, and we actually score and write feedback. And then we provide that to the culinary team live at the hotel, and then also follow-up notes. And if we don't feel like the hotel is excited for a food conference that's very food focused, or we feel like the culinary experience we had isn't what we're looking for, we won't go there. And we're willing to put a little bit of extra to go somewhere that is going to create that culinary experience for us than somewhere that might not. Because the attendees are coming to gain inspiration from the hotel. And we want them to get that in the way they present the food to the attendees. So we'll even say, how do you display food? We will grade them on how the food was displayed and put out when we do the tastings. We do a final tasting too, where our sponsors send sponsored product. So, they might send us bacon or steak or whatever it is they want the attendees to eat, and we'll cook it into the menu. Well, the hotel will, but we'll have the hotel create those dishes and we'll try them to make sure they're presenting the sponsor's food the way that sponsor would want them to present it, because otherwise it's a bad experience for them.
Wait, hang on. So the sponsors send food that then get incorporated into the menus, and the hotels allow you to do this?
Yeah, we pay a corkage fee, and you don't get the discounts when you send sponsored product because it's not from the hotel. But we'll say you need to send enough bacon, for example, for 400 people, and we'll cook that into the breakfast menu. Or we'll do something more involved where we might say, if you have a product that's an ingredient, but not a solo product, you send us the ingredient and we'll recommend recipes, and the hotel will cook those recipes and we'll choose one. And that's what will be cooked and presented in the menu of that reception. So it's very involved. It's a lot of work food-wise, but we want the attendees to take that creativity away from our conference and bring it back to their operation, where you ideally are there for something that's not difficult. But if you are, you're getting a meal that makes you feel good and makes you recover faster and makes you feel comforted. And our operators are thinking about that all day, every day. How do we make meals that are going to be comforting and help people heal faster and help them have an experience here that they feel good about in a situation where usually you're in a hospital, you don't want to be there. So it is important. And we want them to have that experience from us because that's what we're there for.
You even have a culinary competition at the conference. So you got to tell us about this.
It's really fun. It's a lot of work. We have a whole planner and a whole staff member that's all they do is our culinary competition and an entire committee. But we have teams of 2 from hospitals and senior living facilities. They submit from across the country and we blind score them and then select 5 teams to compete on site at the conference. So the second night is typically our culinary competition and reception. They cook, they have a timed cook, and they have to cook the dish that they submitted and then incorporate a secret ingredient that we don't reveal to them until the day before the competition. Like this year it was tamarind, and they have to incorporate that item into their dish. And then we have judges. We usually have 1 or 2 celebrity judges, and then we'll have judges from specifically healthcare and senior living food service. We have 5 judges, and they score based on a number of different categories. Taste, the way it looks, the way they cooked, was their space clean? It's very involved. And then we also have MCs that are running around live in a sort of Iron Chef style, interviewing the teams as they're cooking. They're interviewing the sponsors that are supporting the competition, and they're talking the whole time. So the attendees are in the room eating hotel food that's been provided and typically sponsored by one of our vendors, while they're watching the competitors compete. And then they go all the way until someone is selected as the gold, silver, and bronze winners. And that's presented on stage at the end of the reception. So it's very fun. It's very involved.
Do the attendees get to walk around at all and meet with the chefs or meet with the teams? Probably not, because they'd be distracting them.
Well, they have stanchions around the competing teams. So you have the attendees walking around and watching the 5 teams cook live. So they're not very far away from them, and they could yell at them if they wanted to. Sometimes their team from their hospital will come and be cheering them on as they're cooking. But yeah, they're not talking to them because the chefs take this very seriously. It's a big deal to win the AHF National Culinary Competition and be considered a top-level chef in the industry that's providing innovative food and has won that. So they're very focused when they're cooking.
Wow, it sounds just like Iron Chef, including the MCs and the people walking around. I'm coming to your next conference.
I tried to figure out if we could afford giant banners of their faces, with their arms folded, but it was too expensive.
You could probably get that sponsored.
Yeah, true.
You don't think of hospitals and senior living facilities as having amazing food, but what I'm hearing is that your members are really devoted to giving patients a great dining experience with good food that's good for them, that looks good too. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a surprising industry when you get into it if you haven't experienced that before, because food is such a focus, but somehow it's on the sidelines when we talk about our healthcare system and our senior living system. But you don't want to put a family member into a location that doesn't have good food, and you don't want to go to a healthcare facility that doesn't have good food. I think we've all experienced that. I was in the NICU with my daughter for a few days, and we didn't have a good food experience. And it wasn't a self-operated hospital. And it's a shame because you're in one of the more difficult points of your life, and you want just that moment of comfort to have. And when you don't have that, that's the focus. And you're thinking, wow, this is extra miserable now because I don't want to be here. And now I'm eating food that doesn't make me feel good and doesn't make me feel comforted.
Wow.
And some of our members they're all doing very difficult things, but they're very passionate about food. They're very passionate about patient and family outcomes. And they're also cooking and taking care of the nurses and the doctors and the staff and the CEOs. They're cooking for everyone. So that did become way more of a focus in COVID. I think everybody sort of realized, hold on, these people are here and they're the ones that are feeding us. And that was nice that is more of a focus now. We have also lots of children's hospitals too. So when you think about that, some of these people are doing really difficult things.
It sounds like the rebrand and all of the things that you're doing has really stemmed the decline, and now you're growing. So how's membership and what's next?
Membership is great. We've seen growth this year. We have more new members. We have larger systems coming in of hospitals and senior living facilities. So the next step for us is we're going to host our strategic planning session in the first quarter of 2025. And that will really be the first new strategic plan that's not linked to COVID, because we built one in 2021 that sort of folded into 22 that we're just closing out. And this is, I think, a fresh take for us on a new strategic plan and how we can keep this momentum going, because we've sort of done the scary thing. And now the question is, how do we keep that going and make sure that that growth continues? That's really the next step for us. I'm very excited to be able to do that and build out a new strategic plan. And I think our board is excited as well. We have a really amazing team of directors on our board that are really focused on the association and that strategic growth and providing services to members. So I'm excited.
Well, Leah, thank you so much for talking to us about your membership. I certainly learned a lot. Now I have better questions to ask when a family member is about to go into a facility.
Yeah.
I hope that you'll come back in the future, because it sounds like you're riding a wave of innovation and just a lot of exciting things happening. Thank you so much for this great interview.
Yeah, I would love to come back. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Associations Thrive. We're so glad to have you here. You know, my personal mission and the mission of my company, Matrix Group International, is to help associations and nonprofits increase membership, generate revenue, and thrive in the digital space. I want to hear stories of how your organization is thriving in today's challenging landscape. Please apply to be on my show by going to podcast.matrixgroup.net. By the way, do you need help with a digital initiative? Maybe it's a website redesign, a new membership database, or a hybrid meeting that you're planning. I'd love to connect with you. Please visit the Matrix Group website at matrixgroup.net. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of Associations Thrive. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating, post a comment, and share it with your colleagues and friends. Bye!